All right, good evening, everybody. Yeah, I think I joked Sunday about getting the most sections. I think this is probably, oh, now what? This might be the record number because we have 14. So we are, I obviously have too many pages of notes because I'm still trying to get back to the beginning. Okay, so section 82. I think we're, if you are, anybody need a harmony book? We do have some in the back if you need one. So we're starting in section 82 today, which is on page 116. Okay, so, and I kind of summarized this and finished up last time, that we're kind of at a hinge point here. We've had to transition from this belief that there's going to be this political king, this political Messiah, to God's revelation of a suffering Savior. So we have to transition from that expectation. We've had the miracle working popularity. We're turning towards the cross and the cross-bound purpose. This is a transformation from an external religion to an internal transformation. So that's another hinge point, if you will. And then from the limitation of this was for the Jewish nation to universal salvation. Just because we're going to talk a lot about the third bullet here, Jesus' life on earth can be looked at. One of the ways we're going to look at it is he came to reveal to God the Father and inaugurate the kingdom of heaven, and he was doing that through his teaching, through his miracles, and the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecy. Of course, he came to redeem humanity from sin by offering himself. But then he had to establish disciples and empower followers who were going to be able to spread the gospel and establish the church after his death and resurrection. And a lot of tonight's discussion is around focusing from what the events with the miracles and the things that he was, the crowds, basically. And we talked last time, when we finished up last time, they had gone to the Gentile nations. We had the issue where he rebuked the scribes and the Pharisees, and we noted that the scribes and the Pharisees actually, who didn't get along with each other, were now conspiring together. And so that's about where we ended up last time. And so where we're going this time is he's removing himself once again with the 12. And he's going up to Caesarea Philippi, which is a remote area in the Gentile nations. And that's where he's going to again, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the preparation of the apostles this evening. And so I've kind of, again, these are the 14 sections, and I can see that my slide has covered up the whole page, but I'm going to take them in some groups, this being the biggest group. And this starts with, he really tests his faith, because he asks the question, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And the apostles say, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, others Jeremiah. And he says, who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter replies, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Interesting, a little bit later, he strictly charges the disciples to tell no one that he is the Christ. And right after this confession, now he had to start to talk about his suffering and death. And if you just kind of think about it, he's demonstrated his power over creation, his power even over death. He's raised people from the dead. So, and again, there was this anticipation of someone that would come to rule and subjugate basically the enemies. And now he's got to transition from that demonstration of power to, yeah, but I'm going to die. They're going to kill me. And so he started now telling them and relaying that message in more specificity. And this would, remember last time he talked about giving the Pharisees the sign of Jonah. And so he's speaking in veiled language. And so here he states plainly that he's going to suffer and be killed, and on the third day rise again. And we're all familiar with Peter's response that said, this shall never happen to me. And of course, Christ's response is that, get behind me, Satan, you are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. And so he starts talking. It's going to ask me every time it goes to sleep. I got to set this. I'm sorry, I got to set the sleep thing so I can stick with my notes. This is followed by, and we're going to cover several sections, then we'll get into the discussion. Well, then he immediately says, if anyone will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. And he ends this little section here, though, with some hope. And he talks about the Son of Man coming again with angels in the glory of the Father, and then also foretells the judgment that will happen there. The next part of the story is he takes Peter, John, and James up on a nearby mountain to pray, and as he's praying up there, we have the story of the Transfiguration. And they see him talking with Moses and Elijah, who were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Peter says that, shall we build a tent for all three? And at that point in time, a voice comes out of the cloud saying, this is my son, my chosen one, listen to him. On the way back down the mountain, Jesus tells them again not to tell anybody that vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. And then there's this discussion about Elijah, and Jesus communicates them that, because there are still questions. There were still questions about, is this the Messiah? Is it a prophet? And they have a conversation about Elijah, and Jesus tells them, basically communicates to them that John the Baptist was the Elijah, but he was not recognized, and they did to him whatever they pleased, and that also was going to happen to him. And then again, in the final section, before we get into some discussion and questions, as they move to Galilee a little bit later, very plainly again, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him and be raised on the third day. And they were greatly distressed. So that brings us to our questions. I'll open it up for anybody's, if anybody has any comments. I have a few comments to make. So anybody we don't have, okay. So again, imagine the struggle to reconcile the anticipated reign of the Messiah with a dead Messiah. And so Peter can't. He rejects Jesus. He gets rebuked. He moved from just previously confessing Jesus, now to really being influenced by Satan, by trying to deter Jesus from his duty or destiny. And Jesus used it as an opportunity to teach a denial of self. And so a very, very challenging teaching for the apostles at this time. There's an obvious connection to the previous miracles. Dwayne has a comment here in a minute. There's an obvious connection to the previous miracles. I think the other thing where Jesus raised somebody from the dead. I think the other thing from this section, when we got up on the mountain, when Peter was ready to honor the three, God spoke up and put Jesus and basically took over in response to Peter's desires on all three and proclaimed his son. Dwayne, go ahead.
A little bit more about this on Sunday, but when you're reading through this, you got to look for those key moments in the story, because there are stories within the story that really make a big difference. So one obvious huge moment here is Peter's confession. So when you see something like that, you got to take note. All right, what does this confession mean? How does this move the story to the next position? If you notice also in section 83, or 83, I'm sorry, that in both Matthew's account, so that's on page 117, but both Matthew's account and Mark's account, it says, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and the teachers of the law. So when you see a phrase like that, from this point on, or began, you know that this is sort of a transition, or I think Roy's been using the word hinge. It's a transition in the story that's worth noting. And then when you get to the point of the transfiguration, it's another huge moment. It's really the climax in this particular story of these sections. So I think always look back and look at, all right, what stands out in these stories that are moving to the end, what really matters. And I think those are the major points of that.
Emery's got something back there.
So I like it in the New Testament whenever God speaks to demonstrate. It's very impressive. I mean, he's making a point. You know, it gets your attention like that voice. They didn't have PA systems back then, so when you hear a voice that would be something that's coming out of nowhere but can be heard everywhere, I just think about, what would I do in that situation? I mean, it would be cowering. Would it be awe-inspiring? You know, it strikes me as a moment of a memorable moment of whenever God speaks.
And again, that's a great point, and about that particular episode, and I might have, let me see if so one of the things that I glossed over as I was going over this slide, in that particular, just before that, the discussion about that with Moses and Elijah that was taking place, speaking of his departure, which was about to accomplish. And so as Dwayne says, this is a pretty significant point. There's a lot of things going on here. A few notes for mine is, first, obviously it confirms the confession that Peter had just made about him being the Son of God. And it confirms the prediction of death with Moses and Elijah talking about Jesus' departure. And it certainly confirmed that the apostles needed to listen to what Jesus was telling them, regardless of how outrageous it might be. So it was definitely a very significant event here. Anybody else have any other thoughts on any of these questions? Looking at what we've seen so far teaches about God, Christ, and ourselves. I mean, pretty straightforward. As far as ourselves is concerned, one of the things that we can consider, just like Peter, is we can certainly be prone to spiritual blindness and misunderstanding. And we see that happening in the disciples. I think also that, God's the sovereign revealer. He unveils the truths, and he's been doing that through divine intervention. And I think for us, when we talked about the passage about taking up your cross and follow me, what it means to be a follower, and I think we can take that message from that as well. Yes, go ahead.
Just to what you said about like God revealing truths and revealing them at the right time. I was just going back and reading in section 82 at the end of that where it says Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. I just didn't kind of think about that for a while and kind of go back and look at our other like study up to this point, that because at first I was like, well, all these people know about him. What does he mean by don't tell anyone that he's already well known at this point? But I guess it's speaking to more in this moment when he's talking about the church and talking about, I guess this is kind of is this really the first time that he's spoken about that specifically, like in his teaching up to this?
I mean, there have been instances, and we're going to see some more instances this evening where he says, don't reveal this, or where he is controlling the timing.
Right.
And that's really what's been going on here. Even the withdrawal,
right,
when they withdrew, is controlling the timing. And we're going to see lots of examples of that throughout this evening. And I think, but there was also an aspect here where people aren't ready to hear this.
right,
So they're not ready to hear that I'm going to die and be raised from the dead. Wait until I'm raised, basically, to let these things out. And so it's not just about my timing's not right, but it's the people aren't ready to realize that as well.
right. So to your point, the God revealing what and then when for when we're ready for that as humans. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on this pretty significant section that we just went through? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and move on. And I actually combined the later foretelling of his death and resurrection, but 87. We have, when they get down off of the mountain and they get back, there's this really pretty significant argument going on. There's a lot of people are kind of exercised. They're arguing with the scribes who are there, and they're discussing a situation where there's this young boy that has a demon, and the disciples weren't able to cast it out. So at first, Jesus expresses his kind of exasperation, his impatience, because as he speaks later on, it's a matter of faith, which has been the issue here. It was pretty interesting about the boy's father, and that's in the second passage that I have on the slide, where he appeals to Jesus. He says, keyword there was if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said, if you can. And all things are possible for one who believes. And the father of the child immediately cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. And then the disciples come to Jesus later, and why could we not cast out this particular demon? Because remember, one of the things we didn't talk about much on earlier was he'd sent the 12 out and given them powers to heal. And so so they had this question, why we couldn't cast out this this particular demon, and this is when Jesus talks about having faith like a grain of the mustard seed that will allow mountains to be moved. And so he expresses that there in this particular passage. So I'm back to questions. Anybody have any thoughts or comments on this particular section here? I think one of the things that it does is it reinforces Jesus' authority over evil, because he obviously has that authority over this particular demon. It also kind of critiques the entirety of the faithless generation, and it helps in preparing the disciples. It reveals some of the disciples' inadequacies so that they're better able to understand those. Carrie has something.
Looking at in Matthew 17, it's verse 17 or 19 in the Mark 9, where Jesus' reply is like, "Oh, unbelieving and perverse generation, how long shall I stay with you and put up with this?" I think it's such an interesting, to me at the same time, it shows on one hand that he is like his holiness and being on, God, being able to like see all of this and from a higher view, and how, frustration with, I guess, like, okay, how long do I have to try to get it through to you? But then on the other hand, I feel like as a human, it's very relatable, because it just seems like such a kind of funny little, and like the footnote talks about being momentary impatience with the environment, but it just feels like a very on the other hand, kind of human response of how much do I have to deal with this? I keep trying to tell you, I keep trying to show you, and it's just not. I just think it's a interesting little quip there.
And he was human. I think the other thing, though, that it does show is God's patience with the faithlessness. And so he had patience, ultimately was able to, was willing, despite the lack of faith, was willing to heal, and so he had that compassion. I think, as far as, we're obviously, and Carrie was, I think, making this point a little bit, is that's definitely human, our shortcomings in faith, and we're definitely prone to that. Just like the apostles were prone to that. So that's something else that we can learn about ourselves in this particular episode. Did anybody have any other thoughts on this section? I think connecting to what I just said, we just definitely need to kind of prioritize faith building and things that strengthen our faith, because we can be prone to weak faith. Did you have something? Megan, did you have something? Can we get Megan the microphone?
I mean, he had grace and mercy and still healed the boy, but he also didn't just gloss right over it. He called him out on it, but in a kind and loving way. And so I think, because sometimes we get so offended if anyone calls us out on something, but there is a way to do it kindly and with love, but not just glossing over some
Right.
thing. It's also a little depressing, because if even the disciples didn't have enough faith, how could I? And how many times do I feel like this boy's father, like, I believe, help my unbelief? I mean, that's just what that resonates with me, that he said that.
I have to admit, too many times am I saying, please help my faith.
I mean, no matter, I've been in this church for
Right.
41 years, and that's always going to be the case, I'm sure, in life.
Yeah, I think the other thing to come back to is that this is also, again, still, we're in this period of teaching and training, everything, pretty much everything we talk about is oriented on preparation of the apostles for what's to come. And so this is just another episode. Okay, we got about 15 minutes to go. So the next event is this discussion about paying the temple tax. And Peter was asked, does your teacher pay the tax? And Jesus was aware of that, didn't wait for him to come in and comment, but he asked him, he says, from whom do kings of earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others? And when he said from others, Jesus had said to him, then the sons are free. But then he goes on. However, not to give offense to them, he provides for a miracle to find the tax, but not to give offense. Go get this shekel, which I've made available to you, and then pay it to avoid making offense. There's a lot of things that Jesus didn't need to do that he did. They didn't need to be baptized, but he got baptized. He didn't need to pay the tax, but he paid the tax. He didn't need to die, but he chose to die. All things that were going to help the furtherance of the kingdom. And so I think one of the lessons that we can take from here is that not to prioritize what's our rights. In this case, they had a right not to pay the tax, but not to prioritize what our right is, but to prioritize what the impact is on others. So Joy has a comment that she wants to make.
It's interesting to me that in the comments there at the bottom of the page, that the temple leaders, the collectors, seemed to know who had paid the tax and who hadn't, since it said Jesus and his disciples were not in Jerusalem at that time. But apparently they had some way of, checking to make sure everybody was paying it, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think that that'd be the tax collector's job, was to make sure that everybody paid. So we'd definitely have to know who did or who didn't. Again, it's another episode that's orchestrated as a teaching moment, and he uses it as a teaching moment. The other thing that again he is emphasizing here is his divine sonship. That kind of echoes what we saw in the Transfiguration, and that made him free from earthly obligations. But again, he's voluntarily submitting to avoid offending people. Anybody else have any other comments on this particular one? Go ahead, Jason.
I think that can't be emphasized enough, though, is sometimes we need to sacrifice being right or winning an argument or making a point in order to be able to continue to have a conversation. Creating a lot of offense would have made it more difficult for Christ to do the teaching that he wanted to do. It was difficult enough as it was, just by him speaking the truth of his teachings. And so he didn't want to add to that. And I think that's a very important lesson for us. Sometimes, if it's just about our ego and proving to somebody we're right, maybe we're better off not fighting that particular battle and get ourselves in a better position to have an honest conversation about what's important. I think Christ's message here was, this is not an important thing to win on. The more important thing is to be able to continue to have access and to continue to have the conversation.
And I think that's a great application of that in particular, in how we deal with other people and how we take that humble attitude towards other. It can, again, it allows for further conversation, where offending people shuts people off. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Hey, real quick, if you go back to section 88, there's a couple key points there. One is at the top of page 123, it says what you've been talking about. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching his disciples. So that shows that this is the teaching of his disciples section. So that's a key verse that shows that. The other thing is, if you have a pen, this would be interesting to mark for you. Look at on page 123, Luke's column, at the very bottom of that first section, it says, it was hidden from them so that they did not grasp it. So if you want to write down Luke 18:34, it's on page 164, the same terminology. It was hidden from them so that they did not grasp it. Also in John 13:27 through 20 on page 201, when at the Last Supper, when Judas left, the rest of the disciples didn't know what he was talking about. So there's different from maybe our life sometimes, that there's some divine shrouding of some information so that Jesus could accomplish his purpose. And so this, when it says it was hidden from them on multiple occasions in text, it's good to know that, link all those together.
All right, thanks. Okay. Get on to the next two sections. And so now we have this discussion about who's the greatest, and then a section that John's zeal, which was also rebuked by Jesus. And so in this case, so there was the disciples were asking who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, and we have the pretty familiar discussion that points to whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And then he goes on for this admonition against one that would cause someone else to stumble. And so that's really the essence of this particular section. And he follows up because John is criticizing someone that's casting out demons in Jesus' name that wasn't part of them, which Jesus rebuked him and said basically, anyone that's not against you is for you. But goes on again to make this admonition about causing other people to sin. And then also included in this is the story of the 99 sheep and the one that went astray, the lost sheep, and indicating again the extent of God's care for the innocent and for the who at the time children had very, very low status. So Jesus again is raising the status of the humble and the innocent in this particular teaching. And throughout our study, we've seen how he's been inverting the world's hierarchies, and this is another example of that as well. God values the lowly. He pursues the lost. Even to the point in the account in Matthew assigning angels to the little ones, wanting to make sure that none perish, and again admonishing us to that we can't be responsible for causing others to stumble. Real quick, anybody, any other thoughts or comments on this section. Did you have something, Jason?
Well, it's just the same thing. It's funny because he's just been talking about where he's the Son of God. If anybody's not paying the tax, it should be him. And he says, just pay it. Don't worry about it. He humbled himself. And then immediately after that, they're like, who's the greatest? Who's the greatest? And it just misses the point. And I think that's something we learn, or we should learn. Don't get me wrong, our elders are shepherds. They are the leaders of our congregation, and our preachers are working as servants of God. But they're not the greatest in this congregation. There is no great in this congregation, and that's what we need to get past. If we're trying to be the greatest at Palm Springs Drive Church of Christ, we have missed the point. And it just amazes me how the apostles, just immediately after he taught them humility in terms of the tax, they're immediately going, who's going to be the greatest? We want to be the greatest. I want to sit by your right hand. And as you say, he goes again to the humility, and then he goes one step further with a story and talks about God humbles himself to go search for the one that is lost, because that's who's important to him.
And it's also like Megan said, you know, if the apostles struggle with this, you know, that's a definite warning for us as well, that we need to be very, very aware of that. And so it continues on now and talks about the right treatment of a brother's sin, and this is the 70 times 7 for forgiveness. And the whole focus is reconciliation and forgiveness. Because then we have the story of the servant who gets forgiven but won't forgive. And so there's an admonishment there in this particular teaching. And so again, the focus here is on reconciliation. It's right after this discussion of humility. So from humility to basically unlimited forgiveness. And again, if you put it in the context of the expectations before the Messiah showed up on earth to where we are now, where, again, it's definitely spiritual, and it's completely upside down from this concept of being in charge. It's submissiveness, it's humility, and so he's moved from a discussion. There was a discussion of sinning against others, and now to being sinned against. Back on the Sermon on the Mount, there was a discussion about going to a brother who has something against you. Here, it's going to a brother who you have something against. And so there's a little bit of a contrast between sinning against others to being sinned against. But in every case, it is attempting to be reconciled and acting with humility and not putting your consideration above those of others. Since we're running out of time like we always do, was anyone had a burning comment on this particular section? And then again, this it's all familiar passages, but now we have a section of you have to be humble, you have to be forgiving, you have to be submissive, and oh, by the way, it's not going to be easy, that you're going to have to sacrifice. And you're going to have to make tremendous sacrifices to be one of my followers. You're going to have, you know, he was basically homeless. You had to prioritize following Jesus, lay the dead to bury the dead. You had to prioritize following him and not stopping, not delaying, not going back to say farewell to those at home. And so It requires a significant commitment and will also require some suffering as well. And so that was that section. And then the last section is Jesus is going to the Feast of the Tabernacles. His brothers still don't believe in him. And but again, and they say he should go. Timing's not yet right. He said, my time has not yet fully come. Now he does go, but not in an open, public way. And so, again, here we have God controlling the timing of events for his purposes. And so I think, again, most of what we were talking about tonight was this aspect of preparation of the apostles, of starting to educate them about his upcoming death, learning to rely on faith, prayer, understanding that they're not going to be powerful, they need to be humble, and they need to practice forgiveness and recognition that great sacrifice is required. And so those are some of the things that he's trying to start to educate his apostles, to strengthen them for really what's to come, and what's to come not only with his death, but what they are going to be charged to do afterwards. All right, thanks everybody for your attention, and I appreciate everybody's contribution.